Hello everyone and welcome back to Football Manager 2020 and the second part of this experiment where we're taking a look at what would happen if I released every Premier League senior player. So last time we went 1 year into the future, we took a look at a lot of the different teams, but I thought that one of the best ways to show you where the biggest, or at least the best players have gone would be to just jump to this shortlist screen and sort the players by currently potential ability. Maybe current ability would have been better, but you can see here Kevin De Bruyne came all at Real Madrid alongside Eden Hazard there. Sterling also out at Real Madrid. I'm just looking for players we might have missed last time. You can see Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang back at City. Rodri went to PSG. We already knew about Trent to Man City. Gareth Bale still at Real Madrid. Not part of this experiment, but good to know. Gabriel Jesus at Borussia Dortmund. Kante there at PSG. We saw him before. Virgil van Dijk now at City. Eriksen at Inter Milan. Wijnaldum also at City. I mean, City were really the team that absolutely dominated this experiment. Paul Pogba now at Lyon. That is a very interesting move there. If we have a look at Lyon's transfer history, and go back to the previous year, they picked up quite a lot of players. Jermaine Defoe picked up on a free. Jay Rodriguez, Tom Heaton, Moussa Sissoko, and of course Paul Pogba as well. What a signing for them. Only 94 grand a week for Paul Pogba, and yet J. Emmanuel Thomas is on 180. Amazing. I love the way this game works out sometimes. But I'll just quickly run through this. You can also pause the screen if you see something that looks particularly interesting. Richarlison now at Sevilla. Anthony Martial at Real Betis as well. So's Lo Celso. You've got Sadio Mane at Shanghai. Lacazette at Lazio. And a few other little ones dotted around here. Divock Origi also at Inter Milan. Any others? I think that's probably all the big names already covered now. Harry Maguire at Man City. And Ruben Loftus-Cheek has ended up at Borussia Dortmund. But plenty of decent transfers going on around the place. Sergio Aguero now at Dalian Yifang. I'm not sure why he's so lowly rated on potential ability, Sergio Aguero, but there you go. So what we're going to do today is probably go about 5 years into the future. So it'll take us to the year 2025. We'll look at how the Premier League is shaping up, if anybody's able to challenge Manchester City, and if any of the Championship clubs have really started to go up the table. It's also worth keeping an eye on the Champions League and if the English teams are able to compete, or maybe even the likes of Lyon now competing at the top table of European football. Before we do go ahead, I do want to thank you guys as well. We've now hit 25,000 subscribers, which is absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for that support. It does really help the channel grow. If you are enjoying these experiments, do make sure to subscribe. The next experiment we do after the final part of this one will actually be a huge transfer embargo across the Premier League and every major team in Europe. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. It'll be a 30-year embargo. So do subscribe for that experiment when it comes out in a couple of days' time. But thank you for all your support on the channel up to now. And drop a like on this video if you're enjoying the experiment. But let's go forward into the future and see how the teams are doing. So we've gone 2 years ahead, and as you can see, when we left off before, Manchester City were the Premier League champions, unbeaten, only 2 draws against Liverpool at Anfield and at home against Burnley. And also Leicester City in second place with 87 points, and Crystal Palace in the top 4 as well with 70 points. Burnley and Bournemouth just behind them, Liverpool in 7th, Arsenal 9th, United in 12th, and Chelsea relegated on 22 points with only 3 victories, although one of them was at home against Manchester United. But they lost 22 of their 38 matches. Really poor performance. Sheffield United really struggling at the bottom of the league. Now the following year, you can see Manchester City again taking the title, not doing it undefeated this time though. 3 defeats added to their rap sheet. You can see Arsenal take second, just ahead of Leicester. 3 teams on 69 points. So is West Brom and Leicester, both round out the top 4. United, Spurs and Burnley taking the remaining European places, and a bit of a significant gap to the next team down, Newcastle. Liverpool only in 9th place. They've not been able to recover. And down the bottom, Norwich, Villa and Brighton relegated. And then in the most recent year, you can see Manchester City at the top, 91 points. Leicester in second again. Liverpool have recovered to third. United have recovered to fourth. Palace still fighting in the European places. And Arsenal now back up to fifth. The league's starting to take a more traditional shape to it now. And then further down, you can see Leeds doing well, Burnley doing well. And relegated are Bournemouth, Bristol and West Ham. But you may notice there is still no Chelsea. They lost in the final of the playoffs. So their first season in the Championship, they nearly got relegated a second time. 2 points away from dropping down into League One. And then the following year, they did manage to finish in 6th place. But then they lost in the playoff final to Middlesbrough and some way off the automatic promotion places. So Chelsea have got Roberto Di Matteo back in charge of the club, but they've had a terrible dive bomb down the leagues here as a result of this. Their transfer embargo in their first year, you can see nothing brought in, despite all those players released on a free. And then the following season, the players that they brought in just weren't of the kind of quality they needed. Chris Willock, their biggest signing from Benfica. And then you've got the likes of Jack Simpson, Zahor. It's just not a very good raft of players being signed, and they really did struggle. £26 million worth of players leaving the club. You've got Andran going there for £23 million. I'm not sure where they got him from. He was a youth player, signed for £28.5 million. I'm not sure he's necessarily worth that. And then the most recent year, they have spent £51 million. Miranda coming in from Barcelona, Gbamin a decent signing, but other than that they've not been able to bring in many great players, but not too many leaving either. I suppose they don't have an awful lot to actually sell. Sierralta here, who's a player they signed for £4.7 million the year after their embargo coming in, but they just don't seem to have done a particularly good job with their team. And if we just sort them by their valuation here, not a lot of players over 10 million in there. You could put most of an 11 out, but it's just not good enough. And they are still down in the Championship. Manchester City, though, no doubt about their transfer ambitions. If we have a look at the previous year, £329 million spent on players. £106 million on Dybala. They've also spent £64 million on Bergwijn from Eindhoven or PSV. And lots of other players joining the fray as well. £184 million of sales though. Aubameyang going to PSG, Digne going away, or Dean Matip going for £43 million to China, and Tielemans going to Bayern Munich as well. So major turnover in the City team of £409 million the following year. How is this not breaching financial fair play? Dembele for £109 million. They really have just gotten absolutely for it here. £173 million leaving, Everton gone, and then lots of others, fringe players that they brought in on free transfers, also leaving the club. So City doing absolutely loads there. Leicester seem to have really benefited. They still got Brendan Rodgers in charge, and look at that spending, it ramped up. They brought in all these players on a free. They did the most comprehensive business of anyone in the Premier League. Then the following year, they back it up with some other big marquee signings. Tammy Abraham joining the club, and then £192 million, but well distributed on a lot of good players rather than just going for big, high-value ones. And you can see players going out £180 million, so balancing the books. Diego Jota, £97 million to Juventus. Tomori going to Palace as well, who've also been doing really well. If we look at their transfers, 80 million, 48 million, and then 134 million. Again, really well distributed. They're not just going for big signings. They're bringing in a lot of good players. 115 million going out. Saka going to United for 57 million pounds. And given United had the most hilarious wage budget last time, it would be foolish not to take another look. And you can see at the top here, Florentino Luis, the 22-year-old, on a fortune, having signed for 52 million. Maybe not a surprise there. John Swift, 27 million pounds on 200 grand a week after joining from Reading in the Championship. Now no longer plays on a regular basis, but still on the cards. Callens, another player, Peruvian, came in on a free from New York. earning 200 grand a week, having played 3 times last year. And my favourite of all of them, J. Emmanuel Thomas, still at the club. Good luck getting rid of him on the transfer list for 250k when he's paid 180 grand a week. Hasn't played since those first 24 games in his original season. Now 31 years old. I mean, that will keep me going for so long, that transfer. But they've just absolutely wasted this money. Look at the number of players on over 100 grand a week. Absolutely horrific, the state of this. I mean, it's amazing some of these are even retaining values of £10 million. You've got 9 million for Andy Yayadam, who's on 175k a week. This Arturo Vidal, at least he's a decent player. He is earning a big wage. He's not worth very much now, but you know, there's some justification in that. But a lot of these other players, absolutely horrific, the United transfer policy. But they did manage to finish in 4th place, currently managed by Nuno Espirito Santo as well, which is good to see. Now, who else finished in a reasonable position? Who's done well lately? Not a lot of teams. West Ham getting relegated down here. Let's have a quick look at their transfer history. Bit of money spent, but not on the same level we've seen from other teams. And you can see from their free transfers, they didn't exactly do great business in their first year. So I don't think we need to look too much at the transfers. I think you can get a feel for the transfer policies of the different teams just by seeing how they finished up in their league positions, really. The surprising thing is that Leeds haven't managed to push up further in because they would have had probably one of the better squads originally when this save started, but I suppose the likes of the other teams above them have actually been strengthening their squad. So let's go forward 2 more years, have a look at the rest of the league table, then we can have a look at the Champions League and the other competitions to see how the teams have done. Well, we are now a couple more years into the future, and if we look at the first season to follow the last, Manchester City still champions. Leicester have dropped down a bit. United now in 2nd place, but Newcastle in 3rd, which is very nice to see as a Newcastle fan. Burnley further down the table. Relegated were Wolves, Southampton and Middlesbrough. Still no Chelsea in the league table. The following year, though, Chelsea have finally sprung back, but City nearly lose out on the title here to Spurs of all teams. Leicester back up to 3rd, Liverpool in 4th. And then a pretty standard formation here. Newcastle from 3rd down to 14th as Bournemouth, Birmingham and Nottingham Forest all get relegated. And then the following year, City hang on to the title again, 6 points clear of Spurs. The top of the table pretty much returned to exactly where it was before we started this experiment. You can see Fulham and Derby not far away from Arsenal and Chelsea though. So there is some upheaval in the standard order. But no real surprise. There's a lot more Championship teams now in the middle of the Premier League table, but Bristol, Wolves and Huddersfield all relegated. If we have a quick look at the Championship over the past few seasons, you can see Chelsea missed out on promotion that year, but then they finished as champions the following season with 94 points. Bournemouth and got Nottingham Forest also going up. Sheffield United very close to relegation. The following year, Wolves, Bristol City and Aston Villa, with West Ham missing out through the playoffs. Sheffield United recovered a little bit. And then the most recent season, Southampton, Norwich and Brighton going up. But the top of the Championship looking like the Premier League bottom of the table when we started. But no Premier League teams relegated out of the Championship at this point. So most of them have begun to bounce back in various different ways. We will just look at the transfers. If we go to the top, and we can see where the money's going. Morgan Rogers going to Chelsea for £120 million. Enormous business there for Morgan Rogers, who's been with City for quite a while now. Canna going from Liverpool to Real Madrid for £104 million. Ruben Neves to PSG. But you can see City here spending a fortune every year. United have really opened the taps as well, bringing in some good players. João Felix coming in. Phil Foden has gone to Leicester from Borussia Dortmund. The year before that, not as much money being spent, but City again right at the top of this. Manchester United weren't in here, or weren't in the picture as much as the other teams around them. Liverpool spending a bit of money. Again, City just the huge transfer outlays. You can see United popping in there with a few, but it's been all Manchester City really. The money all coming from their club. Huge transfer outlays on different players. They spent billions since this experiment started, and they had to rebuild their club from nothing, but it has delivered them many Premier League titles in a row at this point. They'll be heading for 10 in a row in the next part of this experiment. But what we need to do now is go and have a look. If we start actually with the FA Cup and see FA Cup, not sure, there it is, FA Cup. And look at the past winners here. We don't want to go through the different seasons, but you can see City were dominating it. And then one year we had Palace and Derby County in the final. Palace managing to win the FA Cup. I don't know if they've ever won it before, actually, Crystal Palace. I have a feeling they haven't. And indeed, I don't think they have. Even way back in time, they've never won it. So there you go. No FA Cup win before for Crystal Palace, but they've done it now. Obviously, they had those great years a little while ago, but not managed to do it since. So the FA Cup, no real surprises there. Carabao Cup past winners, Leicester having a surprising hold on the trophy. Arsenal and City, though, the other winners of it. Burnley got to a couple of finals. Millwall got to another final, having done that a couple of times in the not too distant past. But no surprises really in the Carabao Cup. So if we head over to the Champions League up next, and what we really want to look at here is less who has won it. We would imagine that the big European teams have won it in the previous years, but we've had a few interesting teams get into the group stage. So if we start by having a look at this and trying to find any decent English teams, you can see Liverpool finished bottom of their group with 4 points, absolutely smashed. City got through their group. And Spurs at the bottom of that. I suppose the first year, not that interesting. But the second year, who have we got in here? Man City, second in their group. Spurs, second in their group. Palace, 1 point, which they picked up away from home against Benfica. They didn't do particularly well in their first appearance. And Leicester, bottom of their group. They did manage to get a win at home against Ajax. It wasn't actually that difficult a group either. So disappointing they didn't manage to make it out. The following year, West Brom actually didn't finish bottom of their group. They're only 2 points off getting into the knockout stages, West Brom. Amazing stuff from them. Arsenal in third. Leicester did get out of their group with Bayern Munich. A couple of good wins in there against Salzburg and Sevilla. And Man City didn't get out of theirs, so that's quite interesting. We will look at the knockout stages next. It's just easier to do it like this. Liverpool missing out. United did finish at the top of their group. City going through, and anybody else, Leicester bottom that time, not able to make it out. And I think we had a more standard lineup. You can see all of the English teams getting out of their various groups there. Am I missing one? You've got City, Spurs, United, and then Newcastle, 1 point, which they picked up at home against Sporting Lisbon. It's a little bit of a shame they couldn't do better. And then in the most recent season, Leicester not making it through, Spurs and City did. And the other English team, I can't seem to find it. We've got City. Oh, there we are, Leicester in third place in their group. So, not brilliant from a lot of the teams. If we go back, though, and have a look at this knockout stages through the different years, you can see Man City managed to make it through that year and in the quarterfinals were beaten. The second year, Man City again knocked out, Spurs knocked out, so no need to look further ahead. Leicester beaten by Barcelona after they made it to the knockout stages, the only English team to do so that year. And then City and United both managed to make it through into the quarterfinals, and it was United who were knocked out. City managed to get past Lyon. Semi-finals, it was Juventus and Real Madrid who made it to the final. The following year, a few English teams this time. You've got United and City both going through, but Spurs taken out by Barcelona. Quarter-final stage, City make it through. Semi-final, they are beaten by Bayern Munich. And in the most recent year, Spurs taken out and City do manage to make it through. Quarter-final stage, they're beaten by Atletico Madrid. So Real Madrid with the most recent one, PSG, Real Madrid again, Juventus and Barcelona adding to PSG's other victory at the end there. So no English teams really doing particularly well in the Champions League. In the Europa League, if we look at the past winners here, you can see United beat City in a Europa League final in the 21-22 season. Leicester missed out in the previous season, but they have since won it beating Red Bull Salzburg in the final in France. So Leicester add to their competition trophy cabinet with that Premier League title. They've now got 4 FA Cup runner-up finishes, but 1 Europa League win, 5 Carabao Cups, 2 in a row in there. So they have been adding. They've now got Neil Lennon in charge of the club, which is interesting to see. I don't think there's probably anything else to have a look at. We can look at the overall shortlist of best players and just see if they've moved to any other interesting clubs. Frankie de Jong now at PSG. Just look for former Premier League ones. Harry Kane having a good old time at Real Madrid. Bernardo Silva now at PSG. Raheem Sterling at Real Madrid. Trent Alexander-Arnold still at Man City. Leicester benefiting from Christian Pulisic in the team. Phil Foden, Tammy Abraham and Marcus Rashford all at Leicester. So a good English contingent there. Dominic Solanke doing well for Manchester United as well. We might want to have a quick look at how the England team have managed to get on, because they've got Mason Greenwood in there as well as a very good young player. A lot of these players have now turned over. Jadon Sancho and Callum Hudson-Odoi both at United. So United and Leicester have a big stranglehold on the England national team. And looking at how they've done through the different years, not well in the European Championship. In the World Cup, knocked out by France. The following year, qualify, but then beaten in the quarter-final by Italy. And in the most recent year, they did get a nice 9-0 win over Liechtenstein, with Mason Greenwood getting 4 goals for England. He's got 18 and 30 currently at Spurs. Seems to be doing reasonably well with them. But the England team, not necessarily that successful. And if we just have a look at the World Cup, you can see France, the winners in 2022. So we'll leave it there for this part of this experiment. If you do want to see one more part, do drop a like down below. Make sure to subscribe for that final part and the next experiment, which, as I said, will be a 30-year transfer embargo across the big teams and the entire Premier League. But do drop a like if you've enjoyed this one. And until next time, see ya.